Hi everyone. So I'm currently in the back of my neighborhood, just enjoying the stream, the winds, and thought it would be a good introduction to this entry on my blog. Just because the topic and the emotions that are going to go into this entry, I feel like would do better in a format that feels more like a conversation as opposed to just, straight writing. So I will talk about my experience at Mauna Kea and my recent experience here on Oahu with a local organization. So yeah, stay tuned. And also I wanted to give a huge shout out to Huiku Maoli Ola. They are a Native Hawaiian plant nursery based in Kaneohe. So thank you for supporting me, and yeah, please be sure to support local businesses doing good things. So yeah, thanks for reading, guys. Hey everyone. So I really wanted to make this video at the stream at the back of my neighborhood. It's so nice out there, but it was just a little bit harder than it looks, so I'm just gonna do it here back home. So yeah, I did want to give a quick shout out again to Huiku Maoli Ola. Thanks again for your support. And yeah, everyone, please check out this local native nursery in Kaneohe doing good things. So yeah, I wanted to just state that like in the last couple of weeks, I've really felt just the power that we can exercise as being citizens in our community and having a voice and taking action. For example, later today, I will take photographs of the king tide for the university, and this is something that I'm, just doing as a citizen. It might seem like it's not going to take a lot of time, it might seem minor, but when all of us do something like that, it's really, helpful for, their projects. So yeah, that's just an example. And same with, all the volunteering I've been doing this summer. When I think about like how big those koa trees are going to get in Waimea Valley, or, taking the time to, rid the native plants that were planted from the weeds that we're pulling, in the end, it's going to make a big difference. And that's a lot of power that we have. Also, writing to our legislators, just having an opinion, just stirring the pot, it is a good thing. And I think this was an important realization for me to have because, as I stated in my last entry, I knew that I was finally recognizing where my passions lie and where my strengths lie. And I was frustrated because I didn't know when or how would be the right time to go forward, for example, with higher education, etc. And it doesn't have to be complicated. Of course, having advocates in the legal field, having environmental consultant experts, just any kind of having someone that knows the land, the aina, like the back of their hand. Of course, this is invaluable, but so am I as a citizen with a voice. And so that was really empowering. And this past week, I went to a community action meeting led by Zero Waste Oahu. And so I'm going to submit written testimony to the state in response to their residential food waste mitigation policy or lack thereof. Specifically composting. I mean, this is something that I'm still learning. I just started my own compost and, learned a lot from the meeting with Zero Waste Oahu on the details of what that actually looks like on a larger scale. So I'm going to write my written testimony to the city just to encourage them to establish a municipal food waste center, because at this time only large businesses are required to divert their food waste. So, individual households, smaller businesses, etc., possibly hotels, I'm not sure. There's just so much food waste going into our trash problem. And, we do have smarter ways that we could be going about this. So I also want to spend a little bit of time talking about my recent visit to Mauna Kea and just a little bit about my experience and my thoughts on this. And I feel strongly that people should have an opinion and shouldn't be afraid to stir the pot. Like, that saying even annoys me because it's almost a way to control, people's opinions, people's thoughts. Of course, doing things civilly and having discussions and, having sort of a right time, right place mentality is important. But it just kind of irks me when people just decide to stay out of things because they don't want to, quote, stir the pot. So yeah, I reached out to this person, again, that I have a lot of respect for, that lives in Hilo, got their perspective, was a little bit surprised by it. In the end, we agreed on a lot of things because I think both of us are coming from, a conservation perspective. But the point of me bringing this up was because they talked about this area of gorse around the mountain. So, they spent thousands of hours volunteering there. And yeah, they were just talking about how it's sort of getting out of control. And a part of it lies on the Hawaiian homelands and Bishop Estate land that they own. And yeah, she was just concerned that there wasn't enough energy going into actual conservation of Mauna Kea. And so I thought that would be interesting to, bring up. So things that, I don't know as someone that's not a resident of Hawaii Island. So again, you know, my objective wasn't to stir the pot, but was to learn from this person. And I actually did learn a lot of other things that, maybe at some other time I'll bring up. And, we talked about how this is a huge question of what it means to be Hawaiian today, like Hawaiian identity. What is sacred? What is at the core of their culture? And, I only have respect for what I've learned about the Hawaiian culture, and also recognize and support that they have their indigenous rights to the land. And, this should be upheld internationally, as in the UN, there is a declaration of indigenous rights that, everyone needs to respect, and it needs to be upheld, etc. So I'm totally on board with that. But yeah, it's interesting, some people were talking about the piko, the umbilical cord that connects to the Aina, and that I think there was controversy on the fact that some people believe Mauna Kea does not only belong to the Hawaiians, but belongs to everyone, the residents that have resided here for decades, etc. So yeah, huge questions of globalization, of identity, of, being of mixed race. I know obviously so many locals and Hawaiians are not only one thing, but are also of many races. And, that goes for myself as well. So yeah, very interesting questions raised there. And, most importantly, I think that it's been clarified very well by people that this is not a question of science versus culture. Like, we love science. Like, I love astronomy, and any day, any celebrity, in my perspective, any astronaut is, worthy of more praise than any celebrity, is what I'm trying to say. So basically, I'm fascinated by it. And I think, maybe it's intimidating to certain generations that you know, the new generation wants to ask, like, what does ethical science look like? You know, what does it look like when we ask questions like, how was this acquired, by whom, for whom, at whose expense? You know, so there is a way to do science ethically, and, you know, I think this will start those questions. So, one thing that I expressed to my friend was how I just wish there was more research being done on, you know, the amount of water being held around Mauna Kea. And this goes for any place, you know, in Louisiana, for example, where I'm from, there's so much brackish water. And I wonder, you know, there's been so much oil that has been discovered. How much fresh water is actually being held underground? Or maybe it's not even possible because they are at below sea level there. But yeah, I was, you know, recently reading about a study done by scientists at UH, funded by the U.S. Army because they have a training center next to Mauna Kea. And they were basically searching for fresh water, and lo and behold, they found it at a much shallow surface area than they expected to. So they started drilling at 6,400 feet, and at 4,500 feet, you know, fresh waters was found. And I think it's definitely exploring this idea of the islands being containers and holding fresh water in that way. And in that article that I will link, I read that geologists traditionally thought otherwise, and that's why this is important. And yeah, I think this is totally relevant, you know, in the whole question of Mauna Kea. You know, this study was done in the saddle area between Mauna Kea and Mauna Loa, and yeah, it's totally relevant. And I'll talk a little bit about the questions of water later. So, yeah, I mean, the politics of all of this, it doesn't really sit well with me. I mean, when the governor very blatantly started like a smear tactic against the protectors, it was very much a low blow. You know, I think it's very powerful, that tactic, to dig into the psyche of those in power, and think of these people as a certain kind of people, you know, perhaps drug users, um, you know, all of those adjectives that were being described, that, you know, I will say, in my perspective, my experience there was a total opposite. I met families, I witnessed a family from Waimea bring the most gigantic pots of stew, and, you know, they had all five of their kids like serving this stew for people that had been there for a long time. I met a graduate student studying the relationship between the environment and Native Hawaiian health, specifically research done at you know, in a certain place, and yeah, just there was so much warmth, so much aloha, and yeah, I was very aware of, you know, what he was trying to get at, and I didn't appreciate it. And I'm glad that, you know, Hawaiians are strong and intelligent, and, you know, shot that down right away. Um, so yeah, there are lots of things that are insulting about this. I mean, from what I've read, you know, if this 30-meter telescope were to get built, cultural practices would be limited to 4 days a year on Mauna Kea. You know, that's incredibly insulting and unacceptable. And I wonder who negotiated this and who was consulted. Um, so, yeah, and I think that's as far as I just want to talk about the political sense of all of this. For me, it just brings up a sense of agitation. So, um, yeah, I think that, yeah, there's still so much that we could learn about the fragile ecosystem on Mauna Kea. I believe I'm pronouncing this correctly, but the Wekui bug is incredibly endangered, and I did read on the university's website that its existence and habitat are totally threatened by not only climate change, but it very specifically states there the development of astronomy, which I think is also very powerful, in addition to that study of water that was done and funded by the Army in 2015. Um, so, yeah, I think the governor brings up a really important point about wanting to develop the economy and wanting to diversify it. I totally understand that. I mean, I'm from a place where, big oil is everything. So many people's livelihoods depend on that. And in exchange, what has it done to the Louisiana coast? It's completely rid itself of a coast. Not obviously not only because of that, but it definitely didn't help. Um, so again, that goes to those ethical questions in science that we need to start asking, like at whose cost, at what cost will we, diversify the economy? And, very interesting points have been brought up, like these top executives, these PhD astronomers, where are they going to be coming from? I know that TMT has spent a few $1 million in higher education here in the state, but it's still a very vague thing to say that, it's going to diversify the economy and bring jobs when, we all know that people will be brought in for certain jobs. And yeah, as I've heard a lot of scientists say, research results are never promised. You never know what could be found. Though I do want to acknowledge that the existing telescopes on Mauna Kea have proven to make major breakthroughs in astronomy. So again, yeah, science is it's needed, right? But can it be done ethically is the question. And yeah, so I just want to clarify that, my time spent at the Mauna was enriching, and I so yes, my time at Pu'uhonua o Pu'uhuluhulu University was also interesting. So Candice Fujikane, whom is a University of Hawaii English professor, gave like the most fascinating talk. It's titled Mauna Mo'olelo, and she talked in great detail about Hawaiian mythology and how it directly ties ancestral knowledge to our understanding or lack thereof of the environment around us. And to do this, she talked in great detail about Lili No'i, whom is the goddess of haze, fog, and how rain is collected through saturation. She also talked about Poliahu, the goddess of snow, and the yellow mamane that through one mo'olelo, it just, described in great detail how the Mauna was once just covered in this golden golden light, which was which were the yellow mamane trees. That today, you know, I mean, I don't know if they are there or not, but from what you can see, a lot of the forests are gone due to agricultural grazing, which she also talks about a little bit. Um, yeah, she talked about the aquifers up there, and did say that officials are denying that there is water up there. And, it's just, there's just so much we don't know about the place. It is the largest mountain in the world. If you measure from underneath, it's still a wonder. We have to dedicate our research to the mountain itself, So, yeah, they talked about how protecting the springs is going to be the next fight. And, it's going to be very interesting to see how everything goes down. So she also talked about how this 30-meter telescope, 18-story project has vowed to be as, ecologically sound, and, they plan on minimalizing their carbon footprint as much as possible. But she said, we all know, with the movement of chemical and human waste, in such a fragile area, there's bound to be an accident one day. And just taking someone's word for it is not enough. In fact, I've heard that there have already been, hydraulic chemical spills on the Mauna, which is incredibly concerning. And so, yeah, I got a lot out of her talk. She has a book coming out called Mapping Abundance in a Planetary Future. So I recommend everyone to check it out. I definitely will. And she also talked about a mo'olelo based on here on Oahu. I don't remember what it's called, but she talked about a mo'o, which is in Hawaiian mythology a lizard, dragon-like creature that follows this path between Mount Ka'ala and Red Hill. So again, Mount Ka'ala is the tallest mountain on Oahu, and Red Hill is currently where the city's aquifer lies. I've written about it in the past, and I will be volunteering at Mount Ka'ala for the first time soon. So it just felt great to have this connection in someone's work about like things that I'm just learning about that are in my imagination currently. I got so much out of that, and I'm very grateful to her for just sharing that knowledge with us. And she posed this question, which is going to lead me to talk about climate change now. There was another talk on climate change, but she sort of like led it there in conclusion. How are we going to care for these elemental changes, aka climate change? How are we going to deal with it? And how are we going to do it in a way that doesn't threaten the fabric of our community but keeps it together? So I think it was 1 or 2 days after, Noelani Punivai, who is a professor in Hilo, I believe. I don't remember exactly what she teaches, but she gave a talk on climate change. Unfortunately, I was really late. I missed a lot of it. But Candace, she, let me borrow her notes. And from what I understand, a lot about what I missed was basically consisted of how we are depleting our aquifers, and how our efforts need to be based on tree planting, because it's such a huge CO2 offset, and so we really need to focus on doing more planting, something as simple as that. And yeah, it looks like they also spoke about how insurance companies have already informed hotels in Waikiki that they will not be covering for flooding. And so I wonder what things are going to look like after that, like what that will lead to in the event of a catastrophe or something like we're dealing with right now, where we'll, watching these hurricanes that we're dodging, maybe one day we won't be so lucky. So just really important questions in climate change. So yeah, when I think about that, my imagination just kind of starts to run wild. Like, what are these wild forces that we just have not seen, even in extreme natural events? Like, what will heat do to rift zones? Like, do we know? Have we studied that? Like, what will it look like? What will it look like when our corals just all start to die out on us? What will it look like when these jet streams that are out of whack, when it's the new norm for this to occur? So yeah, our conversations are gonna start changing based on all of this change that we will experience. And yeah, the trip, every time I take a trip, it just like reshapes the way I think about where I live. And this definitely happened this time. And she also talked about how, and I'm sorry, I'm jumping back. This was Candace that spoke about this, how Richardson, the founder of the law school at University of Hawaii, had, different ways of approaching things than a few of his graduates that were almost retreating what the founder's philosophy was on environmental law. So they started rolling back protection as they believed the purpose of environmental law was to prevent further damage and protect what was left. So almost like a little bit more of a reactionary response. So with like this lens, you're going to treat cases differently than if you weren't having like such a reactionary response. So like this is something I know there's way more to this than I, grasped or understand at this point, but this is like super interesting to me and I would love to learn a little bit more about what she was talking about. But I thought I would just mention it. Um, yeah, so, again with tying in the Hawaiian mythology, so Kane, the god of living creatures, and Kanaloa, the god of the underworld and of magic, will be returning. So how do we dig into this Hawaiian ancestral seed bank to like guide our future? And see, I think that this goes really well with what I was saying before about why it's important to respect and learn about and hear Hawaiians out and hear their mo'olelo because, though Hawaii is the most diverse state in the nation and so many people call it home, there's so much to learn from their actual ancestral seed bank of knowledge on this land that can guide all of us. And yeah, so that's sort of where my mind's at. Again, this whole video format is new to me. I'm camera shy. But yeah, if anyone's watching, I would love to hear from you guys. I'd love to hear about your experience with, I don't know, talking to different people about this, avoiding this conversation with people, your trip to the Mauna if you were there, um, your experience just like as a citizen. Um, all of that is interesting to me. Something that I also talked about in my last post was, just trying to stay away from this like image of being into the environment, and like following a certain lifestyle. Like we are all responsible. We are all from the same place, and it's not a fad. And yeah, I think it's important to feel to for people to really feel that that way they feel like what they say and think also matters. So thank you.